Hello to our class instructor, Ma'am Ruby, and to our classmates. I am Annabel Agustin, taking Bachelor of Early Childhood Education, and I am accompanied by Ma'am Belenas Gatan, who is pursuing Bachelor of Science in Social Work. We are now presenting our research study titled Stress and Coping Strategies of Filipino Caregivers in Israel. Introduction. Filipino caregivers in Israel face demanding physical and emotional tasks. These responsibilities expose them to different forms of stress. And this study aims to describe their stress experiences and coping strategies. Filipino caregivers in Israel perform physically and emotionally demanding work. These responsibilities expose them to different forms of stress. This study aims to describe the stress they experience and coping strategies they use. So, understanding these experiences is important for improving support system for caregivers. Statement of the problem. The main question guiding this study is what are the stress experiences and coping strategies of Filipino caregivers in Israel? Specifically, it aims to determine what types of stress do they experience, or the types of stress they experience. What coping strategies do they use, or the coping strategies they use, and how effective are these strategies? uh, the perceived effectiveness of these strategies. Objectives of the study, okay, to describe the stress and coping strategies of Filipino caregivers in Israel. The specific objectives. The study aims to identify the stress they experiences, the caregivers in Israel, describe their coping strategies, and determine the perceived effectiveness of these strategies to assess the perceived effectiveness of these strategies. Significance of the study. This study is significant because caregivers may gain better awareness of their stress and coping patterns. Organizations and agencies, basis for support programs, may use the findings to develop support programs. And future researchers may benefit from updated information on caregiver experiences abroad. And the academe may use the study to enrich discussions on stress and coping. Scope and delimitation focus on Filipino caregivers in Israel and covers stress, coping strategies, and perceived effectiveness. Um, and self-reported information through interviews and does not include caregivers of other nationalities. This study will focus only on Filipino caregivers currently working in Israel. It will examine their stress experiences, coping strategies, and perceived effectiveness. And this study will rely on self reported information gathered through interviews. Review of related literature. Okay. Literature shows that caregivers often face emotional strain, physical fatigue, and social challenges. Studies also note common coping strategies such as social support, prayer, rest and problem solving. However, research is specifically focused on Filipino caregivers in Israel remains limited. Limited research on Filipino caregivers in Israel. So, which this study aims to address. Theoretical framework. This study is guided by two theories. The first one, transactional model of stress and coping by Lazarus and Fogman in 1984. And the second one, ecological systems theory by Bronfenbrenner in 1979. Um, transactional model of stress and coping, um, which explains how individuals appraise stressful situations and choose strategies to manage them. And Bronfenbrenner, the ecological system theory, which highlights how a person's environment and social system influence their coping behavior. Okay, and together these theories help explain how Filipino caregivers experiences stress and respond to it, whether personal and social context. Research and methodology. This study will adopt a quantitative descriptive design, and participants will be Filipino caregivers selected through purposive sampling, and data will be collected using semi-structured interviews, and the study will take place in selected areas in Israel where Filipino caregivers are accessible. Data gathering procedure coordination with Filipino caregiver organizations and informed consent and confidentiality, in short. Okay, and then distribution via branded and online forms, and 2 week data collection period. So now participants will be contacted and informed about the purpose of the study. Okay. And interviews will be scheduled according to their availability. With the permission, interviews will be audio recorded, and we make sure that all information will be kept confidential and used only for academic purposes. Ethical considerations. The study will secure informed consent from all participants. Participation will be voluntary, and withdrawal will be allowed at any time. And use of codes instead of real names. So participants' identities will be protected through the use of codes, and confidentiality will be strictly observed. Treatment of data. Okay. Interview recordings will be transcribed and analyzed using thematic analysis, and responses will be grouped into themes to identify patterns related to stress, coping strategies, and perceived effectiveness. Expected outcomes. Um, the study is expected to identify common stressors such as emotional demands and physical fatigue. It is also expected to describe coping strategies used by caregivers, including social support, rest, and prayer. Okay. Understanding of perceived effectiveness of these strategies. Okay, finally, it aims to present how effective these strategies are based on participants' perceptions. Okay, the summary in our research study. In summary, this study seeks to describe the stress experiences and coping strategies of Filipino caregivers in Israel using qualitative approach. The findings are expected to contribute to improve support for caregivers and to the academic understanding of stress and coping. That's all, and thank you so much for listening to our presentation. We welcome your comments and suggestions. And thank you again, and God bless us all.